Rami, can you hear me?
I can, Eddie. Hi. Hi, Lisa Marie.
Good to see you.
You too. Hi, welcome, Todd. Welcome, Nico. Hey, everyone. So thank you. Let's maybe take one more minute to see if more people will join. Thank you for being prompt, and we'll start in a minute.
I have the text.
Oh, thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone. It's great to see all of you and for making the time. I think I've met all of you already, right? Eddie, we've met in one of the previous calls, right? Great. One thing that I thought of doing for a long time and I kept forgetting is that I would have loved to start these meetings with chanting the Gate of Sweet Nectar, like a nice way to just kind of set the tone. Even if we're just going to follow it up with a conversation, but it's kind of like a nice way to settle. And if you're not familiar with the words, I'm going to put in the chat the link on the website where it's at, and we're just going to chant the first stop, the first paragraph. And maybe just a word about the chant. So this was really Bernie's favorite piece of liturgy, and he kind of called it the anthem of the Zen peacemakers. It's coming from a Shingon Buddhist liturgy, and it's very elaborate, but it involves visualizing the abundance of food to feed all the hungry spirits, and the real food that they're asking for is the food of awakening. So he would love to chant that whenever he had an opportunity. So I don't think we can all chant together with Zoom. So I think I'll just, Lisa Maria, maybe I'll mute you, and then we can all just chant with ourselves, but we'll just do it together. Calling out to hungry hearts, everywhere through endless time. You wander, you thirst. I offer you this body mine, calling out to hungry spirits everywhere through endless time, calling out to hungry hearts, all the lost and left behind. Gather round and share this meal, your joys and your sorrow I make mine, calling out to hungry hearts everywhere through endless time. You wander, you thirst. I offer you this body mine, calling out to hungry spirits everywhere through endless time, calling out to hungry hearts, all the lost and left behind. Gather round and share this meal, your joy and your sorrow I make mine, calling out to hungry hearts everywhere through endless time. You wander, you thirst. I offer you this body mine, calling out to hungry spirits everywhere through endless time, calling out to hungry hearts, all the lost and left behind. Gather round and share this meal, your joy and your sorrow I make mine. Thank you, everyone. I see Miko is already biting into the endless food. Wonderful. So great, everyone. I think in a moment I'm gonna unmute everyone because we're just in a small group. And I think today we're not going to do this in a form of council, but more just of a gathering and this conversation. So the subject for today is either however you want to refer to it, whether it's specifically about climate change, practice around climate topics, love for our planet, the elements, all of that relate to that. So maybe we can just do a quick just check-in, just see where you're calling from, how are you feeling, and we can take it from there. So if you just feel like you want to jump in, just do so.
I'm called Lisa Marie, Luminous Donna of the Heart, and I'm dancing on the earth space called Pennsylvania. I'm with my visiting here for the next month and a half, and Enkyo Roshi's coming to Soji tomorrow to give a Dharma talk, and I'm psyched. So it feels great to be here in a home space for me with the East Coast tribe. And I'm really delighted to be here with you all on Zoom today, talking about our beloved Earth Mother.
I could go next. Lisa Maria, I saw you on Sunday at Soji. Yes. And my Sangha is the Red Rose Sangha, and it's located in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. It's, if you're familiar with the Amish, the Pennsylvania Dutch, it's right there. And the reason I wanted to get involved in today's conversation is because our Sangha has been looking, or at least talking about, becoming more socially engaged. And certainly one of the most important topics is climate change. And I was curious to hear what other people within ZPI are doing.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe I could use some of that information and bring it back to my Sangha.
Great, thank you. Eddie, I'm going to take notes as people are talking and we can return to things.
Yes, I can go next and talk a little bit.
Great.
My name's Todd Ellis. I'm calling from Denison, Texas. That's the Texoma region of northern Texas. I used to be in a Sangha, Maria Cannon in Dallas, and also Boulder Mountain Zen in Salt Lake City. But I took a job at a community college here, and I'm feeling today, like a lot of days, good relatively, but despairing in many ways. Especially in the region I live in. I drive a smart car and commute a bicycle in a land of dually pickup trucks and gun racks and Donald Trump supporters. So day-to-day life is pretty isolated in a sense, not that everybody here is like that, but feeling more isolated than I usually have in my life. And I feel a lot of despair about particularly animal suffering, the billions and billions of animals who are trapped in the human food system and the wildlife that's being decimated. It's on my mind a lot. And like I say, relatively, today's a good day, but there's that underlying despair that I'm aware that I've been feeling for several years now, and just part of my practice. So thank you.
Hi, I'm Mikko Ias. I'm from Helsinki, Finland. And me and my wife, we are running this small group called the Peacemakers Finland here in Helsinki. We have a small Zendo right in the center of Helsinki. And we offer free meditations for anyone who's willing to come here, usually once a week. And every Friday morning, we try to be at the Parliament's house steps, sitting there with the people who are protesting as the Fridays for Future, and lots of young kids over there. Yeah, that's it for now.
Great. Thank you, Mikko, and thank you, everyone. Yeah, and I'm calling from New York, from Brooklyn, and I'm just reflecting back on the weekend where over Saturday and Sunday, we had this really amazing 24-hour meditation vigil, which was, as a practice just of sitting for 24 hours straight was just really powerful. But then it was also woven with all of these guides and presenters and teachers that kind of brought us through these different visualizations and prayers, and I'm just, even now being on this call, I'm having this imprinted feeling in my body of what it was like and what is it like to be on a turning planet, and really seeing the time of day change through people's windows on Zoom in different phases of the day. And I'm just reflecting on things that, some of the teachers were talking about, and Charles Eisenstein was talking about speaking with a shaman from Colombia, and a Kogi shaman, and that basically told them that if you knew that she feels, and he meant the planet, if you knew that she feels, you wouldn't hurt her. And he just repeated that. If you knew the planet she feels, you wouldn't hurt her. And I stayed with that. And then I stayed with it, and I tried to just kind of let it in. And at time it was a bit intellectual, right? I can think about it. And then I thought, I can just continue try to practice different objects and everything that I'm seeing, just to imagine that they're feeling. And I did that throughout that day, and it was really amazing and connecting. And I really look forward to do that more, particularly with what I call nature, plants, trees, animals. This reminding of myself that they're feeling, even if I don't know if they're feeling, but just that questions make me more emphatic. That was an amazing sharing. And there was a Sufi master who just kind of put us in this state of being a drop of water. And this drop of water has been transmuting through different forms for eons. And just kind of sitting with that felt sense. So what was interesting for me, that was a real coming together of both the sense of the connection of the earth, but also the how much the connection to ancestry came together. There was teachers and medicine people who spoke about how we as humanity were reweaving ourselves. And that was kind of like the other side of getting connected with the planet. So there's something with our ancestry and healing ancestry with healing connection with earth, which was very interesting. And finally, just this elder woman from Tasmania, she just brought it back to joy. And she was talking about working with a lot of activists, burnt out, and really connecting with this perspective of time and the joy that she derives from that. I just found it all very inspiring. So that's a bit of my report from that. I heard Eddie speak about, questions, what other sangha's are doing. We heard a little bit from Miko, but I know also Lisa Marie is very involved in different things. I can also just say a few words about what I've been hearing from other sanghas that are affiliates with us. Yeah. So maybe I'll pause for a moment and see if anybody else wants to jump in from anything that I said, and we can continue. Yeah. I do want to note that I did hear Todd speaking about being in Texas and feeling a bit isolated, what sounds like an environment that maybe not as open to your viewpoints, and maybe even feeling a bit afraid to even just share your mind there and finding solidarity. So I just want to name that, and I think it's an important point, like to connect over, like how to engage an experience like that. Yeah.
Todd, for a number of years, I lived in the Deep South in Georgia and Alabama. And I remember reading the quote, "There's no one lonelier than a Buddhist in Alabama." So I hear where you're coming from, but this was before things like Zoom existed. and that you could reach out and have an internet community. It's a wonderful thing. Certainly it tests your practice feeling alone.
Thank you.
But you're not alone.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
There is the koan of how do you explain the meaning of Bodhidharma coming from the West to someone in a dream. So we really cannot. We can only bear witness to the people in the dream in this perspective. But it's a drag. My father used to be a pilot, jet plane private pilot, and he used to traffic illegal arms to countries in Western Africa. And now he's retired, and he lives in rural northern Finland, and disseminates this kind of right-wing fascist anti-immigration propaganda through Facebook from his compound, and goes out hunting when it's not hunting season, and sends these climate denialist messages to me every day, and just keeps me active. But what can you do? You cannot really. These people are not willing to take any facts because they have this perspective to the things, and you cannot really change it.
Yeah,
I think Naomi Klein, in this new book On Fire, she really kind of beautifully says that these people are not willing to change their minds, and whatever you tell them, they are not willing to do that.
Right.
So in that sense, they are like the people in the dream.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. I appreciate the solidarity messages from people. I have to say, recently Texas became a minority majority state, meaning they're now minorities are the majority of the Texas population. But all the legal structures, governments are all pretty right-winged white people. And so you end up here, and I have ended up with a small group of people who have joined a Plant Pure Nation, which is a group so what we're doing and I don't think you change many minds, like you've said, but our approach is showing the research on how healthy it is to eat animals to eat plants instead of eating animals. So surprisingly, that's got about 40 people who came to it, and about 20 who stick to it. And so, but it doesn't take long in this region to sort of find out who the people are who are open to it, and that's it. It doesn't really grow after that. It's like those 20 or 25 people in this region. So it's a lot like being a Buddhist. When I was in Salt Lake City, there's about a certain number of Buddhists in Salt Lake City, and it doesn't really grow. It seems like there's just that certain number. So thank you for acknowledging and sharing your ideas.
Thank you for your vulnerability, Todd. Everyone's got some amazing wisdom in these times. And I wanted to share a book that an elder at the Eco Dharma retreat that I met, it's called Savage Grace, Living Resiliently in the Dark Night of the Globe by Andrew Harvey and Carolyn Baker. And I'm finding this book to be really poignant in today's day and age. It's a daring book. It tells the truth. It puts it out there, and it's small. It's like the truth isn't big and long and complicated, and we're making it really complicated. We human beings. How I've been active in the Sanghas out in Colorado is I've applied for an Earth Holder community, which is Thich Nhat Hanh's lineage, a regional community builder, because we need to reconnect to the earth and to each other. And that's one of the first things that humanity needs to do, is to reconnect, learn how to be in community again. And with the Zen Peacemakers, I do service work with the Zen Peacemakers in like the emergency women's shelter, the Metro Caring Food Bank. I do stuff like that. But we've also been doing the climate strikes. So I've been calling in the Zen Peacemakers Denver and inviting people that I know that I do service work with to come and do the climate strikes. And I've also, as a result of having the Eco Dharma retreat with David Loy with the Extinction Rebellion folks, I have joined Extinction Rebellion as an elder. So I'm not quite sure exactly what my role is, because this group is so young. But I feel like being there as a container for these youth who are quite wise for their age. They've come into this world and they see what's going on, and just like Greta. And I find them very wise for their years around revolutions around the sun. And so I feel that it's important to give them support and grounding in the middle way. So I practice in the peacemaker tradition, the white plum tradition, and also in Thich Nhat Hanh's tradition. And I'm attempting to bring in that tradition. So we had an action on Black Friday, and we have our first Red Brigade, Denver. I don't know if you've heard about the Red Brigade.
No.
I'm wanting to join them. They're silent, they're mimes. They are so passionate in their nonverbal expression. They're artistic, and I think the artists and the musicians of the world are the ones who really understand and see the truth of it.
Can you say more about what they do?
Yeah, Extinction Rebellion is a nonviolent, direct action civil disobedient group, and they're rising all over the world. They started in London, and you can look up the Red Brigade on the Red Rebel Brigade is what they're called on the YouTubes, and you can look up Extinction Rebellion. Roger Hallam started it. But at Eco Dharma, Lisa Fithian, who is also a long-time activist, she wrote a book recently called Shut It Down. She was on the Alaskan pipeline. She shut down the CIA. She was in South America and South Africa. She's done amazing, nonviolent, direct communication work. If there ever was a female embodiment of Buddha, she would be it, or Jesus, she would be it. She's got fierce love. She tells the truth. She listens very deeply, and she's teaching these young people in XR, Extinction Rebellion, how to do that and how to show up. They do die-ins where they show up in government buildings and will, like the mayor's office, and they will just present their signs on climate disruption and change and what needs to happen. And then they all just fall to the ground and they stay there. And some are arrested. They're willing to be arrested so that they get press. And I have been to court to support some of the arrestees. And it's really amazing to me, there's young lawyers supporting them. And one of the judges in Denver declared that, yes, we have a climate emergency. It didn't get in the newspapers, it needs to, but that he declared that. And then he said, and you need a permit to stop traffic on Sheridan Avenue. But, you know, civil disobedience is civil disobedience. And it's to wake people up. It's to teach people about what's going on. Greta's message is very clear, that we are not listening to the scientists and that most people don't know what's going on. They're doing their lives, they're living their lives, they're raising their children, they're doing what they know how to do. And, you know, slowly the planet is heating up, especially on Turtle Island on North America. We're not experiencing it quite as drastically as South America and Africa and Australia. we are getting storms, heavier storms on the East Coast with the northeasters and the hurricanes, and down south, and Colorado's drying up, although the earth is trying to help us. There's a paper that I learned about from the same elder that recommended this book called Deep Adaptation. It's by Jem Bendel. I totally recommend, Eddie, that you read Deep Adaptation, because it tells us the truth scientifically, what's going on and how the earth is trying to, in some places she's greening up. There's more water happening. There's more greening happening to absorb the carbon. So she is actually trying to balance herself. And when we anthropomorphize earth or animals and create an identity of self and other, and we separate ourselves, then we create this mayhem of weird perception. And we're not able, I think a big mass of people are just unable to hear it. It's too frightening. Yet at the same time, I think we're feeling it. I think we're feeling it on a very visceral level, that we are at the end of times. And it may go fast. It may definitely go faster than what the Paris Agreement said. I'm familiar with that. And in that sense, there's so much information coming in that it is complex. There's a lot of issues that are creating this separation between Earth and ourselves, humanity. So this book, Savage Grace, Living Resiliently Through the Dark Night of the Globe, is about the collective. And I think a lot of Buddhist groups are really rising to the social need and environmental need and species need of all sentient beings. I love, Rami, that you opened this up with the Gates of Sweet Nectar. Jason and I learned it, and we sang it at the action on Good Friday. Ha! How's that? Black Friday. And I feel like a lot of what Gautama Buddha taught, a lot of Grandfather Bernie's message and practices of the three tenets are really important to give and share and live and dance awake with Extinction Rebellion. Because they're young and they don't know yet. They have this passion to do what they can with their lives, even though they know that they may not have a planet to continue on. They know this. And they feel it and they know it and they understand the science, and they are going out there and they are dancing their lives awake fully. And I think that's what we have left, right? Our vows, and to dance it awake fully. And so with the Earth Holders, I'm going to be doing trash pickup. We're going to go out and do mindful trash pickup, Samu practice, regularly, sitting regularly, just like we do in all of our sanghas. But what we're going to do after we pick up the trash is we're going to make an appointment to go to the dump. We're going to go see where all this trash goes. And by picking it up, we get to see what we're consuming. We get to see what other people are consuming. We do this without judgment. This is a society we've created, and we're all a part of it. So changing our diet is really important. Veganism is coming up, and my grandmother was a rancher, and she took care of animals, and she butchered them in a very compassionate way, but that's not how our mass farming is happening, and our agribusiness and all of that. So becoming aware of where our food comes from is really important. Being aware of everything that we're doing is important, and that's our practice.
Thank you, Lisa Marie. What a rich life. Thank you for all you're doing. Yeah. I wonder, Eddie, like hearing all of this, I'm hearing what kind of lands for you. I'm also interested, I'm curious what you're seeing in your community in terms of what they may be open to. Um, um, I'm hearing that you're interested in bringing this action to your community, but I'm curious, so what are you seeing in terms of what's possible?
Well, first, I want to bring this information to my Sangha, and then collectively we'll figure out what our next steps are. But the area in Pennsylvania that we're located in is politically very conservative, very Republican. I guess you would say Trump supporters. And on the other hand, there are what we sometimes call the plain people. The plain people are the Amish and the Mennonites who have these farms, not really very far from here, who I think are certainly trying to be and understand the notion of being stewards of the earth, although probably not quite the way we as Buddhists might see it, but they are. I mean, clearly they care very much for it. And sadly, if you went back 50 years ago, most of the Amish certainly, and to a certain extent the Mennonites, were farmers. So they were very sensitive to the climate and climate change. Now what's happening is that the land is becoming very, very expensive, and what would be handed off from generation to generation, we're talking many generations here, they can't afford it. Young couples cannot afford to stay and remain farmers, and are seeking livelihood in other ways. For example, there's a lot of work in a lot of them are carpenters and help to build homes. But in terms of what is going on here, there are some groups who are certainly interested. There was a pipeline that was protested going through the heart of the county, and there was civil disobedience. It didn't stop anything. It made maybe a 30-second blip on the local news, but nonetheless, there were people who were out there bearing witness and protesting. But it's what I find interesting, and it's something I heard. Are most of you familiar with Bill Nye the Science Guy? He's a wonderful man. He used to have this show on public television, and he would explain scientific concepts to kids. And his show has since gone off the air, but he's been very active. He had and you can find a lot of this on YouTube. For example, a debate with a well-known fundamentalist about evolution, and brought scientific facts to the case supporting evolution. And now he's devoting a lot of his energy to climate change. And in this interview I saw with him, he talked about, and I think we've touched on this, some people, their minds are so fixed, they've made up their minds. There's nothing you can do to change it. no fact will change it. And he talked about that. But what he said was very interesting. He said, but talk to their kids.
Mm.
And he said, very different perspective. And their minds are still open. And rather than despairing, and he's not a cockeyed optimist by any means, but he said, it is with the children of these folks who will be initiating the change. And of course, we're seeing that. We work like with Greta. So it gives me hope, even living in a very conservative area.
Mm.
Ed, do they still have the Lancaster Farmland Trust? They used to do like bike rides and stuff to raise money to help the farmers keep their farms.
Yeah, they do. I don't know anyone who, in particular, who is involved in it, but yes, it still exists.
Because that could be a fun thing as a Sangha to do. And I did it several times when I was living in Pennsylvania, and they take you along the routes where they have overdevelopment. So you see what's happening, which is not a good thing for the earth. And then they take you by farms that have been saved. Some of them are organic, and they have signs, and you can go and visit the farms while you're on this bike ride if you want to. And I think it would be something interesting for your Sangha to do.
Thank you.
And then there's just one thing that I got from the Eco Dharma retreat that I thought was so poignant, because thinking about, and we don't want to talk about, okay, this is going to be the sixth mass extinction. We don't like to talk about that. We don't like to look at it. And as Buddhists, we want to stay right here and right now, but we can't do that anymore. We need to stay here and right now. And there is a distinction between grief and despair. And this was what was brought up in the Eco Dharma retreat. I was saying we don't know as human beings how to grieve. And another Dharma brother in this retreat said, grief is something that is felt in the body, and despair is a mind fuck. That's how he said it. So I think as practitioners, if we can remember that this is something that is our strength, because we're always, dropping down into the body, into the breath, and realizing that the thoughts and the mind is illusion. It's not real. It's a dream, like Miko said. I think that's good to have that container of understanding the difference between grief, which we need to grieve, and despairing, which actually paralyzes us from taking any kind of action in our life.
Yeah.
Thank you, Lisa Marie and Eddie. I really appreciate this turn in the conversation, particularly around the skill of the mindfulness that we have and how we use that as we work in this. Just want to welcome Sophie for a moment. Hi, Sophie. Welcome. If you want to say a word or introduce yourself, I can just recap a little bit. We're not in council mode. This is a bit more of a free-form conversation. We started with just chanting the Gate of Sweet Nectar, and then we shared a bit where we're from and what we're doing, and the conversation kind of had these two tracks. Todd is from Texas, and he was bringing up a bit of sense of isolation of working and living in a part of the country in the U.S. that is more close-minded, not very climate or ecologically open. And then Eddie was bringing up just the question of like what to do with his Sangha. And then what we were just speaking about, Eddie was speaking about the locals in Pennsylvania, the Amish and the Mennonites who work the fields there, and inviting him to speak to the kids. So this is kind of like in general the a bit of a recap. So would you like to just introduce yourself, just say a few words, and if you have anything to share, participate in those, please go ahead.
Yes, sure. First of all, I'm sorry for being late. I was caught in a meeting, but then I thought maybe I'll just try and see, and if it doesn't feel appropriate, I'll disappear again, and I'm glad I did. So my name is Sophie, and I live in Western Massachusetts, and I feel quite lucky because in general in this region, people are quite sensitive to what's going on with the climate, up to a certain point anyway. Even though in the village where I live, the very small surrounding, there's a lot of very conservative people that are much more oblivious, and some farmers that are using very chemical stuff, and that's like really gross. But anyway, in general, it's a good spot. I'm not quite sure where to start or what to say, other than for me, it's been a long time that I've been feeling concerned about the climate and so forth, but I had in the last maybe 6 months some kind of an awakening to the urgency of the situation. And it's almost as if I felt like this bump on my shoulder forever, but I didn't want to go see the doctor about it. And then I finally went, and the doctor did a test, and it's a tumor, and it's not looking good. And so all of a sudden, the whole thing became very real to me. And I think in the last 3-4 months, I went through some kind of process of intense grieving. And intense, like I felt like how it was kind of changing everything in my life. Every decision I was making was kind of impacted or was influencing how I would decide things and how I would move forward. And it was a little bit kind of, I think it was necessary, but also I felt a little bit like stuck, overwhelmed and so forth. And so I decided to reach out to other people and find community in this, and that's one of the reasons I'm here. But I'm also decided now I'm in a phase where I'm not feeling immobilized by the whole thing. I feel inspired. I feel that in the same way in the Buddhist tradition, we all know we're going to die and we could die tomorrow, but we're not constantly haunted by our death. I mean, we are in a good way. It makes us appreciate and it makes us grateful, but we're not like depressed by it. we keep on living. So I think I'm more in that space right now, which is much more workable for me, and I feel I can be more useful and contribute better from that seat. And so I'm in 2 communities right now. I'm connected with the Zen Peacemaker, and I'm also in the Shambhala community. And through the Shambhala community, I work there, so it's very present in my life. And I put a project of a website to basically, because I had access to a website and I decided to open it up to a group within our community that is very concerned about climate, which is called the Touching the Earth group. And so I've been collaborating with them and creating this whole website to offer resources for people who are interested in getting more education and finding community and connecting with things that are happening and joining other people in manifesting or marching, signing petition, whatever. So it's kind of a resource website that I've been working on, and that's been helpful also in terms of feeling like I'm contributing and I'm doing something about it. But I'm also very open to do something away from the computer, because my whole job has to do with being on the computer, and sometimes I just can't stand it anymore, and I want to be live with people. And yeah, so I think I've spoken enough. It gives you an idea. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sophie. Um, may I just say there were two things that I found really interesting, and if you'd like to share more, I'll be curious, but we can also open it up. I just heard you say that you did go through some kind of an opening in the past few months in terms of the level of sensitivity and just the urgency towards the urgency. That's what I heard you say. So that was one question that came up for me. I was just curious, like, what was that? Like, what facilitated that? Because in a way, we're talking, Ed and Todd and also Lisa Marie and the rest of us were talking about how do we engage those that are in the dream, right? That are not seeing the urgency. So anyway, that's just a question that I'm curious about, how those transformation happened. And the other one is that you mentioned about, that you have those skills and you're able to work with the grief in a different way. And I'm curious also just from a practitioner point of view, because you're a Dharma teacher and you have experience in that. I'm just curious if you'd like to say more just about the practice of that and how that's been informing how you work with yourself, but also with the communities that you work with. Yeah, so these are questions that interest to me. Also, if there's other questions or any other threads that came up from this.
Well, I can start, but then please join in because I don't want to take the whole space. So the wake-up call for me was just reading, I'm sure you've heard about it, the Jim Bendel paper. I think for me it was at that point where I realized I have to be willing to accept that there's at least a possibility that things will go really bad really quickly. Not necessarily fixate on this and not really kind of view it as the only thing that is real and true, but just sort of take it in fully and let myself be touched by it. Let myself really sort of really consider what that would mean and imagine and spend some time sort of contemplating the whole consequences of that and how that could affect me, my kids, how, to make it really personal. Because up to that point, I was thinking much more long-term, like in 50 years and 100 years, the people in Asia and Africa, it was not affecting me really. I was concerned for others, but it was not affecting me directly. And with this, having read this paper, the whole thing became like, that's not true. It's actually not just something outside me, but I'm part of this, and it became personal. So that's what I would say for this. And then this paper led to many others that confirmed and reinforced that, and others who brought other point of view. So the whole thing expanded and became much more nuanced, basically. But that was a starting point for me. And then in terms of working with grief, I think to me, my whole Dharma life in some ways has been a path of relating to suffering and accepting suffering in my life, pain and suffering. And so all these emotions that this contemplation rises in me that are really painful, like instead of not wanting them to be there, I'm sort of trying to let them open my heart and let that be a force for more connection and for more deeper practice, Dharma practice. I feel like if I'm going to sit on a cushion, I really want to sit and be there. I don't want to daydream, and I don't have any time to lose, So I feel my whole practice has been intensified by this contemplating the possibility that we don't have much time, So that's one of the ways that I've been working with grief. And I want to open it up and see what else come up, because I could keep saying stuff, but I don't want to take too much room.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sophie. Thank you so much. Yeah.
I could share some news from Finland because we just got our new coalition formed here at the Finnish government, and it's completely female-led and young female-led. Our Prime Minister, Sanna Marin, is the youngest Prime Minister in the whole world, 34 years old. And the coalition that was formed last spring, they made their first plan, and the plan began with the words of climate change, and they're really dedicated of doing something. And now we are the spokes country of the EU, and that is one of the primary things of Finland. What they're trying to do is to really to push forward to make climate change one of the leading themes of the European Union, and that's really promising. But so far, the plans of making Finland carbon neutral, it seems like they're kind of pushing that a date further into the future, so they would not have to do all of these decisions by themselves. So they're pushing the decisions into the second government following them. And it doesn't really look that promising that the next government will be that, how do you say that, would be eager to really to make those final decisions. And making Finland carbon neutral is still relying on the huge nuclear plant that is supposed to be functioning maybe next year, but it's so far it's the most expensive building, the second most expensive building ever built by humans, and it's been built almost longer than any other building in the world. So, and it's still not functioning. So making Finland carbon neutral is kind of challenging. It's a big country, very small population, but we are very far up north, and there's lots of industry that takes a lot of energy. And we don't have any fossil fuels here besides peat and besides wood, but we don't have any gas, we don't have any oil, but we're importing that from Russia. And we're not as self-sufficient energy-wise, so we need to import a lot of that energy from Russia, and that causes a lot of tensions and political tensions too. But what makes it a little bit easier is that the Finnish population, we're kind of indigenous group, so it was only 500 years ago when we were invaded by the Swedes, and until that we were pretty much mostly hunter-gatherers, and so there's a very close connection to the nature. And there was a poll done a few years ago of the Europeans that what they consider being the national monument. So the British, they said the Big Ben is the national monument, and the Eiffel Tower is the French national monument, and the Finns, they all said that nature is the national monument. So we all have this very close connection to it. And there's the Church of the Bear is kind of reviving at the moment, which is kind of like the old shamanic religion of Finland, which was forcefully taken away by the Swedes, something like 300 years ago. But it's still part of the living culture within Finland, and many of the people, they know these traditions, how they used to be done, and so on. We have an indigenous minority group called the Sami people living far up north, and they are reindeer herding people. But because of the climate change, the lichen that the reindeer are eating, it's vanishing. So they need to import hay from further south to feed for the reindeer. So it's becoming like cattle now, and it causes a lot of problems because the meat of the reindeer and the fur is really expensive, and they are exported to countries like Japan. And if they lose this income, it's going to be a huge problem for the Sami people. I know several of these people, and they're really, really thinking of how they're going to survive in the future. And there was a case in Norway, in the islands of Norway, where hundreds of reindeer, they died in hunger because in the past they didn't have rainfall during the winter because the winter was colder. And now if they have rainfall in January, for instance, the whole ground, it freezes. So the reindeer cannot access the food through the snow because it's completely frozen. So many of these reindeer, they die because they cannot access the food because of the warmer climate. And we see the effects of the climate change here constantly because it used to be winter this time of the year, but it's raining and it's really, really dark. And we have these insects that wasn't here like 15 years ago. We have ticks here, which are causing huge problems in Finland, very dangerous illnesses given to people through ticks, which were not here like 15 years ago. The same thing there too, yeah. And we have hay fever. I got this huge allergic reactions 10 years ago of hay fever, and we didn't have those pollens coming to this country before, but now because of the ecosystems are moving further up north, we get different kinds of plants here, and many people are getting really sick during the spring because of that. So there's all kinds of effects, and we have more dangerous storms here, which wasn't here like 15 years ago. So we need to put the electric cables on the ground instead of having them on poles, and that causes electricity bills are going high. So there's lots of things that are affecting the country, and especially here up north, you can see these changes very drastically. There was two books that really made a huge impression to me this fall when I read the new Naomi Klein book On Fire, which is the burning case of the Green New Deal. And that was really kind of hopeful book, and tells about Greta Thunberg and Extinction Rebellion and things like this, but especially the Green New Deal and what kind of future it might lay out to us. It's a really hopeful book. Also, Joanna Macy's Active Hope book was really inspiring, beautiful book. Yeah, but our group is trying to do its best, but what is the best we can do? I'm also been really inspired by the Extinction Rebellion, and we've tried to make a collaboration with them, and some of their people are coming to our meditations, and we also participate their actions. I strongly recommend to watch their extinction talk from YouTube to get a kind of like overview of what they're doing. And if there's a group near you, please go to their nonviolent direct action training, which are usually free, and they're wonderful and inspiring young people doing the best they can to protect their future. Thank you.
It seems also, I just want to add a little thing, that one thing that is very useful is just to convey groups like this, or maybe even, like I'm thinking of offering talks, you know, like at the center here in Northampton or whatever, and just let's talk about climate, you know, let's share about this, let's bring it up on the conversation stuff, because right now there's something a little bit taboo almost, like people are like, I don't want to hear about this, you know, like, and if we kind of invite conversation more and more and really share openly without censoring ourselves for fear of upsetting people, you know, but we do it in a gentle way, I think it can have, you know, there's a ripple effect that can happen that can be quite powerful. So I'm really going to try to do this, and I'm encouraging people to do it too. Even like in our families, like at Christmas, we usually are a very kind of Ratna family, and there's a lot of food and a lot of gifts and a lot of too much, you know. And I just had a little sentence at the end of a chain email with people saying, could we simplify a little bit? And I was thinking, oh no, that's going to create a big drama. But it turns out most of the people in my family had the same thought, and they were just waiting for somebody to speak up. And then everybody was like, oh, so relieved, and like, yes, you feel that way too. Oh my God, you know. And then the whole thing, like, anyway, it's really amazing how communication about it can have a powerful effect, I think.
It's interesting. I've been asked to give talks to either college kids or middle school kids on topics of Buddhism and Zen. I remember I was joking with a colleague. Someone asked me, well, can you give a talk on Buddhism and Zen to these ninth graders? And you got 40 minutes to do it. And I remember saying, well, you know, I'm going to have to skim over a few things. And I still receive these requests. And one of the things that I haven't incorporated, well, you have a limited amount of time, certainly, but what I think would fire the imagination of these students is the green movement in Buddhism. I've never touched on that. It's, you know, just kind of get through the Four Noble Truths and maybe the Eightfold Path is plenty, but I would like to figure out a way to introduce that because I think it would pique their imagination and let them know that, yeah, you know, there are spiritual groups that are very concerned with this.
If you're on Facebook, there's an interesting Facebook group called Extinction Rebellion Buddhists. It's a very active group, and they have their own Zoom conferences as well. And yeah, there's lots of people all around the world. Please join.
I just did a little tiny thing. I was teaching the 4 immeasurables, the metta practice, loving kindness. And at some point I just included the planet, you know, like after me, you, everybody, and the planet. And I kept using the planet as almost an entity. And people came up to me after and said, that changed everything for me. Like all of a sudden they were like, it's like as if it's giving us a way to work with the situation where you feel like you're not totally helpless and you can actually send love to the planet as a thing. And anyway, I encouraged that. It seemed to work well and people responded really well to it.
And what I've done is that when I translated some of the chants that we use, I translated the sentient beings as forms of life. So it kind of makes more sense.
It's more inclusive.
Yeah.
Rami, I'm curious, you talked about the retreat you did and you as an exercise approached all things, including inanimate objects, as if they felt. And how has that affected you? How has that affected your point of view? Because I love it as an exercise. I think it's wonderful.
the way it affected me, and I remember when I was doing this, during a break between two sitting periods, I would go to the kitchen and get a glass of water, and then holding that glass of water and asking what in the beginning was like a hypothetical questions. I just asked myself, is this feeling? And I just held that glass. Is the water feeling? Is the glass feeling? Now, of course, then the mind kicks in. Well, it's just a piece of glass. It's just this. It's just that. And I'm like, okay, but this is an exercise. So if this glass was feeling, what would it be feeling? And then that's kind of like how you work with koans, you know, in Zen. It's like I was the glass. And on one hand, I felt very fragile, but I also was very firm. I was proud of being useful. I felt good about feeling useful. So by animating objects, and I think Lisa Marie spoke about the practice of that, of animating everything. This is something that I've been kind of like in the back of my mind. I'm really interested in developing a koan system that is based on present day koans that relate to the climate, that relate to social causes of today. For example, if I'm going into this meditative contemplative space and I'm contemplating to be this reindeer that Miko spoke of, and I'm literally feeling the confusion and the grief in my body right now as I'm imagining my nozzle trying to break through the ice because my cub is hungry. And that connects me to my body. It connects me to my feelings. It connects me to basic needs that I can then imagine that others are experiencing. So it gives me an entryway, first of all, to my embodied experience. But then it just will pop that question in my brain like a song that sticks in my mind. It pops in the subway and it keeps going. And I'll go in the subway and I'll think, I wonder how this person feels right now. And this is kind of like basic, right? Loving kindness, basic, in a way, practice that we do. But what if we actually do it to obvious natural things like trees, like the planet itself? But what about the wood that my desk is made of? How is my desk feeling? Being cut, being shaped, and being useful. He's holding my glass of water. So for me, it was refreshing and humbling to realize just, first of all, how human-centric I was, because I do these practices. I'm kind of used to invoking compassion and try to see, people as myself, but it's people. And I wonder if this is also part of a bit of the shadow of Buddhist practice. I think it's part of what I've been seeing in the shadow of my Buddhist practice, that it's been so much about sentient beings and it's so much about cultivating compassion to other people. And yeah, it's like there's a sense of interconnectedness, but it's like, contemplating that feeling of a blade of grass is not just as a nice thing to contemplate, but to actually feel it. And I think this is where the connection to I think this is why I'm being so drawn to indigenous teachings, because they point to that. And I think that's the connection I spoke of in the beginning, where all of those indigenous leaders that led us in that 24-hour vigil, we constantly spoke about these two things, about acknowledging ancestry and lineage and healing the planet, and they always came together. And I find it very interesting. And I mourn and I have grief for myself that as a European descent of Jewish ancestry, I've got really disconnected from a lot of that, both disconnected from my ancestors, but also disconnected from the sense of land and the sense of connection to those elements. So that's that.
I've spent some time in Africa in my life. I spent my early childhood in Nigeria, and then I did my research for my doctorates in Namibia among the Kalahari San people, the hunter-gatherers, the last groups of hunter-gatherers over there. And it was one of the mornings when we had spent the whole night hunting with the hunters, and we were kind of having this break in the morning, and the hunters were looking for tracks, and me and my wife, we were watching the people kind of going through the bushes, and and we suddenly realized with Maya that this is the first time that we're bearing witness to humans in their natural habitat. And all other places in the world, we are kind of cut off from the land, besides these people over there. And it was kind of beautiful, but also really, really sad, because humans have been living on that particular piece of land for about 150,000 years, as long as humans have existed in modern form, and living in pretty much similar kind of cultures. And they're very, very sad to see their environment changing in a way that they cannot really survive in that place anymore. It's a natural preserve area, and international communities are trying to buy more game animals into that area, so the game animals would be kind of keeping the ecosystem going on, kind of, because some of the plants will vanish if the animals will vanish, but still they have problems like elephants coming to the area and drinking all the water, and other animals will die in thirst because of that. And so the ecosystem is really, really fragile. And now they have a problem of cow herding people moving from Botswana to their lands with their cows, and that causes huge problems. And all of these NGOs kind of protecting their lands, they're trying to do their best, but it's going to change. And during the past 10 years, I've been witnessing their culture changing very rapidly. And it wasn't long ago when 1/3 of the whole group of people, they were shamans, and now there's only one shaman left. And on that whole area, there's only 3 shamans left. So the whole shamanic culture will vanish in 10 years. There's no shaman students anymore. So there's only these 3 shamans left. And all of them are very old and bad shape. So it's really sad to see that happening, because these cultures were kind of a window for us to see the origins of human cultures, to see that what kind of society structures we had on that kind of groups, and what kind of methods they used to be in contact with the land, and how they perceive themselves as animals that they were hunting, and so on. And all of this knowledge will vanish, and it's all because of overcrowding on that area. Yes, but mostly it's the climate that's changing the environment, changing the whole ecosystem. And to think that it survived so long, and now this change is so drastic that it will be the end of the people. That's really striking. Yeah, but it's kind of interesting to see how these people, they really knew that this plant is main for, it's possible to eat, and this plant is for that and that animal, and this tract belongs to this animal, and so on. And for instance, they had wild onions, and once they saw this kind of patch of wild onions that just completely ravaged, and they said that porcupines, they eat the roots of this plant. So anytime when porcupines, they come to this patch of land and takes off these roots of wild onions, they need to replant the wild onions because they can eat the sprout. The humans will eat the sprouts, but they cannot eat the roots. And the porcupines, they will eat the roots. So they replant the wild onions after the porcupines for them to be able to eat them later on. It's kind of beautiful. Yeah. Thank you.
I just wanted to say a little thank you to Rami for sharing this practice you're doing about what do objects feel. It really struck me like a really awesome thing I want to add in my life. Because it made me feel all of a sudden the whole room became like vibrant and alive, and you know, it changes everything. So anyway, thank you for this.
Seconded.
I recently heard this interview of a blind person, and she said that she would not want to have her vision. She never had, because it would be so difficult to survive in the world because she has no concept of what glass looks like. Because it was kind of striking, because for her it's solid and you cannot see through.
Yeah.
I really appreciate, Miko, you're being very descriptive and very visual in terms of describing things. And I'm, you know, whether it was the reindeer or I'm thinking about I have this image of the porcupine, and I'm thinking about the Kalaharis, right? So those were the Kalaharis planting so the porcupines have something to eat. And again, these are because I'm just so visually oriented, for me these are wonderful gifts, because you know, part of me would just love to now just, you know, take a moment and just sit with that feeling of generosity of this person that I can imagine, whether it's a he or she, a child, an elder, planting seeds for this animal that will only come in a few months, if at all. And there's a way to, you know, contemplate the reindeer's frustration with not being able to eat, but then there's also this ability to contemplate the connection that is there. So I really value those images that you brought up. And I'm just aware that, you know, we have about 5 more minutes, and you know, part of me would love to kind of like maybe take a moment of silence and just kind of like take them in. Also just remembering Sophie speaking about bringing the earth into her loving kindness practice and teaching. So part of me feels yearning to kind of be in that space now.
I found this very useful, and it gives me a jumping off point for my Sangha, and certainly plenty to investigate. But I also find it, as I say that, the need for, maybe it's just old age, of not overextending myself. There's a quote, and it's often attributed to, wrongly attributed to Thomas Merton about the social activist who burns out, and that the need to come back to have some kind of contemplative practice to refresh our spirit. Otherwise, yeah, you are prey to despair and thus inaction. Over the summer, I had a health scare, and I was in the hospital for about 5 or 6 days. And as I was staring up at the ceiling, one thought that kept coming up over and over again was a line from our evening Gatha. It says, "Do not squander your life." Mm. And that has been kind of at the forefront of my mind these days, however much time I have left, or the planet for that matter. Don't squander it. Time is a precious resource. Mm.
Mm. Is there going to be more of these?
Yes. First, thank you, Eddie, for bringing us back to that. Yeah, and it's maybe a good way to bring us to a close, this call. And yes, Sophie, so I think this is the 4th or 5th call we've had. So it's been the most consistent subject in terms of what's been asked for by the members. So we have 2 meetings every month open to all members. One is just an open council, and the other is a theme-based meeting. So this is one of them. So yeah, and
women's only also.
And there's a women's only meeting also that Barbara has been facilitating. So you're welcome to any of them, even if the subject is not necessarily, at the front of your priorities. It's just a way to connect and meet other people. And so, yeah. So thanks for jumping in. So thank you everyone for being making the time and taking time to enrich. Hopefully you've felt as enriched as I have in terms of solidarity and connection, and also just reigniting a bit of love and tenderness to this planet, without which my actions would probably not be as useful. Mm-hmm.
Thanks, everyone.
Be well.
Thank you, Eddie.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rami, for organizing this. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, everyone. Really
yes,
lovely to be here with you.
Wonderful. Take care.
Take care.